In terms of my background, I was born in New England, in Maine, and then brought up in New Hampshire. And my family is an old New England family. I actually have 5 ancestors that were on the Mayflower. My grandmother, Frances Rumenier Dewing is her name, who gave me my first book on Buddhism when I was 15 years old. It was Zen poetry, kind of little haikus with paintings. And that, and then seeing a Tibetan mandala painted on the cover of a book by Jung, also around that same age as a teenager, those are the 2 sort of pivotal moments that I track back to my spiritual path. And so I followed that thread of Buddhism and also the mandala to India. I was a painter, an artist, and I wanted to learn how to paint mandalas. So I went to see a High Lama, who was actually Ling Rinpoche. In those days he was alive, and I requested to learn how to paint mandalas. And he said, well, to learn the measurements, just the measurements, will take about a year. And so I was 19, and I was like, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to stay here for a year and learn how to measure. So I left and I went back to Kathmandu, but I didn't leave Buddhism. And then I returned in 1969. But before that, I had spent 6 months at Samye in Scotland, which is the first Tibetan monastery in the West. And Trungpa Rinpoche was there. And so I received the sadhana of all the siddhas from him, which was really a kind of terma that he received in Bhutan, and then met His Holiness Karmapa at the end of 1969 in Kathmandu. And that was the turning point for me. Eventually I requested ordination from him. I was ordained in January of 1970 by His Holiness in Bodh Gaya, and my witnesses were the 4 tulkus. So amazing now, to think back on the fortune of those of us who were there at that early time. And so I studied in the Himalayas for about 4 years, and then eventually came back to the United States, re-met Trungpa Rinpoche, and by then he was in America, and he was beginning to develop his world in America and his teachings, and I was very interested in what he was teaching, because I had been trained by Kalu Rinpoche and Abu Rinpoche and my teachers in India in a very traditional way. And yet I wasn't Tibetan. And so I was very interested to see what Trungpa Rinpoche was doing in terms of how do we take these amazing teachings and get them into my generation in a way that remains authentic. And so I studied then with Trungpa Rinpoche, and starting when I got back, and I disrobed. I began to teach under Trungpa Rinpoche. He requested me to teach, this was around 1974 maybe, 75. So I was in the first group of 5 people that he trained to teach shamatha practice, and then also asked me to teach Vajrayana, which was Ngondro at that point. And I don't think it was because I was realized or really mature in the teachings, but basically there was no one else. So I was probably more experienced than most people. And so, then I went to Italy in 1979 and met Chogyal Namkhe Norpa Rinpoche, which was an amazing experience. It was another sort of really innovative teacher teaching in the West and very different than Trungpa Rinpoche, and teaching Dzogchen. And by then I had finished my Nundro, I'd done Vajrayogini practice under Trungpa Rinpoche, and then I meet Namkha Norpa Rinpoche. And that was like a revelation for me. And as soon as I started studying with him, I felt like my practice really developed quickly. It was strange. It was somehow the influx of the Dzogchen teachings had a big effect on me. And so I studied with him while I lived in Italy for 7 years and then returned to the United States. It was around that time that I began to see my friends coming out of 3-year retreats. And by then I had been in the 3-year retreat of having 3 children. It was more like 7-year retreat. Very different experience, but both with myself and with them, I saw that there was a missing link in terms of emotional development and emotional healing going with meditation. And so I had my friends coming out who had done a lot of meditation, but emotionally they didn't seem to have changed and maybe didn't find the total solution for their emotional problems in Buddhism. And so I began to feel there needed to be some sort of psycho-spiritual path. And that's when I began to create practices and retreats that had both those components in them. And so that's been sort of a theme, I would say, for me as a teacher in the West is working with the emotions as well as the practice. In 1993, we found the land that became Taramandala. It's now a major retreat center with a 3-story mandala temple that was carved by Bhutanese carvers and painted by Tibetan artists, and it's really quite amazing. And we have people in retreat there and long-term. There's somebody in for 5 years now, and others in for longer periods, and then also shorter periods. So then in 2008, my first book was Women of Wisdom, and that came about out of the death of my daughter, Chiara, who passed away in her sleep at 2.5 months, sudden infant death syndrome. And after she died, I went through a big crisis and really wondering about everything. The choices I made. Should I have disrobed? Was it a mistake? Just my practice, everything. And amongst those questions was women. And where are the stories of women who maybe have had similar experiences to what I've had? And the Buddha's story wasn't helping me because he left his wife and child in the middle of the night and went on his quest. I wasn't going to do that. And Milarepa wasn't helping me. He went to a cave and I wasn't going to do that. And so I really began to feel that there must be some women's stories somewhere. And now, of course, that seems obvious that we would need that, but at the time, it wasn't an obvious thing, and I was the first one to really begin to ask those questions. So in 2008, my second book, Feeding Your Demons, came out, and that book became a national bestseller. It has the 5-step method in it for working with our demons, which are things like addiction, depression, and anxiety. And it was the same thing of taking something from the Chöd practice, really the basis of it, and then developing a more Western, or at least accessible to Western method for dealing with those things. That's what Feeding Your Demons is. That process of working with emotions and working with the Dharma has really been the theme for me. And now, this year, my third book was published, and it's called Wisdom Rising, Journey into the Mandala of the Empowered Feminine. And so in this book, I'm teaching on the mandala and the 5 families, the 5 dakinis, and also relating it to the current situation that's happening with women in the world. So again, I'm tying it into, I guess you could say, worldly life. But to me, there's not a separation, and I think that's one of the keys of Vajrayana, that there isn't a separation of worldly and spiritual, that it's really one thing. And so this sort of circles back to the mandala, which was my original entrance at the age of 15 through that mandala on the cover of Jung's book. So that's where I am now.